Your Creative Push, episode 306.
Whatever your creativity may be, you should respect it, nurture it, be friends with it, kind of treat it like a friend. It'll take you places.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Kat Rabbit. Kat is a Melbourne-based textile artist and designer whose plush works are all handmade without a pattern, and she comes on the show today to talk about the roundabout way in which the thing that she was doing on the side became her career, and how she had to carve her own path and take the scenic route. Kat talks about the advantages and disadvantages of being the first to market and how she figured out how to price her work. Kat also lets us in on her new strategy of repurposing her pieces so that they can more effectively work for her. She also discusses the value in not having any expectations for the end result and embracing mistakes and imperfections. Kat also discusses some of her resistances, like dealing with self-doubt and the balance of having too much or too little confidence in your work, and also how she prioritizes her time for learning new skills or working on big projects while still getting to her daily work. Kat also shares some of her early negative experiences on Instagram, as well as the positive ones when things kind of blew up for her, and also how she deals with trolls and negative comments. She talks about collaborating with Isobel Knowles for her other project, Soft Stories, and also setting play dates with other creative people. I had such a fun time talking with Kat. I love what she does, and I really love her attitude towards creativity, and I know that you are going to be delighted and inspired by my conversation with Kat Rabbit. Kat, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much for being here. I always like to give my guest the opportunity to give a brief bio, sort of how you got to the point you are today in your life and your kind of creative life, if that makes sense.
Yep. So yeah, I guess it took me a little while to get where I am now. I started making stuff when I was very small, but I went to university to study English literature and graphic design, thinking I was going to, work in magazines, because that was the 2000 and magazines was still a thing. I kind of didn't really know what I was doing and was just making small crafty kind of projects on the side, and then they ended up kind of taking over my life, I suppose. I was making them as gifts for friends and things like that, and then I found myself making them for small stores and markets and things. It was early 2000s when the handmade kind of movement was coming through, seeing a resurgence in people like appreciating handmade things, and I was lucky to ride that wave and just arrive where I am now. But I kind of did it in a very roundabout way. I studied, as I said, and went on to study honours and then masters, and found myself institutionalized, but still in the university, but still making my things on the side. And then when I finally got out of university, I was applying for jobs and not really getting many nibbles on what I might like to do as a career. And it seems like the universe just wanted me to make stuff. I kept getting demand for these little plush toys I was making, and found myself just making them all the time. So yeah, I guess that's like a little history. I don't know. Does that sound clear? Yeah.
That's a good history.
Yeah.
It reminds me so much of what happened to me when I was going to school. I went to school for computer science, and I actually had an English minor as well, and I was doing poker on the side. And I graduated in 2008, right when the economy was really bad. And the poker thing was something that was working, and applying for jobs and going on interviews, and I wasn't getting any jobs, and you kind of it's great to have that kind of backup thing that you can kind of dabble in for a little while. Did it feel like that though? Did it feel like that it was pulling you, and then like when you were looking for jobs and stuff like that where like that passion wasn't there, or like your heart wasn't in it and you're being pulled into this thing? Or was it more of like a fallback plan, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, it was funny because I guess with an English major, there's not a lot of options in unless you want to like be an academic, and I kind of
Right.
like, or copywriting or things like that, and I was interested in those things, but I just don't think there were no, like, I grew up in a very small state in Australia called Tasmania, and in terms of jobs, there's just not a lot out there. So like things that were kind of relative to my degree were things like data entry and very like minor copywriting jobs, and they just weren't incredibly inspirational, but also I was happy to do them, but I wasn't getting callbacks for them. Like, I'm not like a super outgoing person. I'm pretty introverted. So like when I'd meet people, they'd be like, it's easy to forget me. And so that's fine. No, it's fine with me. Like that's the way I am. And maybe like so I just go home and like be making these little, I'm painting a really weird picture of myself, but like
No, I think a lot of people can relate to that idea.
Yeah. So like, just practically speaking, like I'm not super competitive or anything like that. So it wasn't like putting myself fully out there and saying, give me the jobs and whatever. I'd be like, I'll just go home and make a few little, plush stuffed cats and stuff. And then like, it kind of didn't seem like a valid occupation, I suppose. Like it
Sure.
does now. But back then, like, yeah, to think, how am I going to make this my career? It was kind of beyond me. I was like, well, I'm making them for shops and markets, and I ended up exhibiting them in small galleries with friends, and I could see that was something that was starting up, and it felt exciting and something I could do, but it's not something I could say. There was nobody else I could kind of look up to and say, well, they've made it their career, I can follow their path. So I kind of had to go about like chiseling this little path myself, and I didn't really know I was doing it at first. So it took a long time to get where I am now, kind of like taking the scenic route, as I like to say, like
Yeah.
to my career. So I just kind of like put around, oh yeah, that works. And yeah, I think I was very fortunate to be there and I could see a lot of stuff happening in the States. I think it's a little bit different here in Australia. It took a little while for soft sculpture to take on and be worth something to people. Like I would be exhibiting with people alongside people who were painting and illustrating and stuff, and that kind of had more worth, and people couldn't see, like, a soft toy perhaps is, in the realms of like kids art or something like that. So it's hard to put a price on something that's taking you a long time but doesn't really have a market yet. So that was kind of hard to navigate as well. But once I did, I kind of just pushed through.
Well, do you feel like I totally get that idea of, taking the scenic route. And I think that most creative people would kind of feel like they've taken the scenic route because everybody hits these resistances that we talk about on the podcast, and everybody inevitably hits like long gaps. So it's always going to feel like, you didn't get that direct path there. And I don't think getting directly to wherever there is necessarily a good thing. I wonder, does like the idea of like forging your own path and like figuring it out on your own and kind of being like the first to market, like you were, like you said, you're alongside painters and nobody else is really kind of showcasing or putting plush toys or your creations in galleries. Do you feel like that could be somewhat of an advantage as well as a disadvantage?
I think so. Yeah, there's definitely advantages to it. And the other thing was I could see it was happening somewhere. Like I could see it was happening like on the blogs I was reading at the time in the States. And actually I was invited to be in a few shows over there before I showed here. So it was good to know there was a community somewhere. And that was when people were blogging and kind of talking about their processes and experiences. I'm like, oh, they're quite similar to mine. Like, that's nice to know it was out there. But in my immediate community, it was good because it was like, well, let's invite a token plush artist to be in this thing. Oh, there's Cat Rabbit. Yay, she's there. So it was good in a way, and to set yourself apart. And I also found like collaborating, it was quite helpful early on because a lot of people wanted to find out about my work, and and how I work and see how it would work with their practice. So I had a lot of opportunities to collaborate early on, so that was quite valuable as well, just because by nature of what I did, it was different. So yeah, I think it was created a lot of interest early on for me, which was definitely an advantage.
Right. And I want to get into kind of the process and your story of like how you first started making these things. But I also want to know first, like, how did you end up setting prices and stuff like that? Like, was it trial and error? What was that whole kind of process like of discovering what the market is for your art and what you could charge or what you wanted to charge and what you needed to charge maybe in order to kind of make it a sustainable career?
Yeah, that took a long time and is kind of, an ongoing thing because my practice keeps changing and I keep adding more details, which makes it hard. Like, I'm a sucker for detail and taking a long time with things. So it is tricky. And when I first started, I definitely didn't charge enough. It was kind of a funny position because I was just grateful the people wanted it, and
Right.
to the point where I'd be like, if I was at a market, it was really dangerous because I'd just give everything away. I'd be like, what am I doing? Be like, oh, you like it? You have it. Oh, that's, thank you kind of thing.
Oh, literally giving it away?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I was terrible. So I'm a good example that you can get better. You can charge things. And so when I started, I kind of thought, okay, I better get serious, stop giving stuff away, even though that was very nice. But like, I kind of would calculate my materials are negligible because I kind of try to use very humble materials, just felt or often recycled material and things like that. And it's just the time it takes. And I guess anyone who's knitted a sweater would know, like, you don't need a sweater to make a lot of money. It takes a very long time and it's about the process as well. So I kind of bring it back to how many hours it takes. But I also have different kind of price points for different things. And I have a made to order range where I can kind of order in bulk the fabric and know what I'm doing. So I charge a little bit less for those. But if it's a commission and I'm drawing it and making it from scratch, then that's a little bit more. But yeah, like just paying myself an very rough hourly rate is how I work it out now. But then like recently I did an exhibition of artworks of needle felted works and I mean, they just take endless hours. Like I just couldn't, when I was coming around to pricing them, I thought I just can't charge them, the millions of hours these took. So I had to kind of compromise with myself and thought, well, this is the stuff I want to make. And like a kind of compromise to that is like putting a price point that is like, I'm happy to get this amount of money for it, but I'm also happy for it to be in the world and for people to look at it. I don't know if that makes sense. It's very tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hugely valuable, I think, to just get an idea in your head and create it and birth it kind of.
Yeah,
like it's like having a child. You can't like put a price on this. Like I'm creating this thing so that it can work for me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's actually how you say that is quite interesting because lately I've seen that I just thought I can't actually charge in terms of looking at the marketplace and looking at what other people charge. I can't charge the hourly rate. Like that would be a ridiculous amount because sometimes I just spend a long time and I like to spend a long time and don't necessarily have to. So I actually have been recently making little worlds for my characters and then using them as actors, I suppose. Then they're working for me. So they're doing some work before they go off into the world being sold for whatever price, but like they're making me some money. So they're like acting out little scenes for me, if you know what I mean. So I kind of look at it
they got to pay their dues before they can go out into the world.
Pay their rent. Yeah, exactly. So I'm just like trying to get them to work for me in other ways. So, you can't possibly recoup on some handmade things. It's a very hard thing. And so, yeah, like prints and scenes and books and things like that, like looking at different ways to, if I'm going to be putting so much work into them, I want to like photograph them or document them in lots of different ways. So I've just tried to be creative about how I do that. Yeah, try to get better at photography, try to get better at documenting everything. Because in the beginning I was just making them and not even taking a photo, and then I'd be like, oh, well, it's gone, it's out of my life. But now I'm like pretty particular about, okay, so I've made this croissant, what can I put? I'll put it in a bakery and make a little story about it. So it kind of gives that character more life before it's sold and given to its new owner or whatever.
Right. And I like that idea of utilizing them in multiple ways and like, you know, being able to sell prints, you know, create this like little artistic setting, like, and make a really cool photograph of it that somebody can hang up of this little scene, you know, and kind of tells its own story. So not just selling, you know, creating the thing and shipping it off, but being able to use it in multiple ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing when you get to the point where you're like, wow, I couldn't even afford my own work, you know, like, so I'm charging this price that I couldn't afford. It's kind of a weird concept. So like trying to make it affordable or accessible to lots of people, because you want a lot of people to be able to enjoy it on lots of different levels. So if it's like, yeah, a nice print of it, that's cool too. Like just giving lots of different access points to your work is kind of a good thing to work out, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you talked about early days, and can you take us back to like the earliest day, like the first time maybe that you created something like this? What was it that caused you to start this?
I think it happened without me really knowing. So I was always making little things when I was small, like out of felt or knitted or things, little toys and stuff. They were always pretty funny looking things. And then I think I came back to it. I was drawing lots of characters in the margins of my notebooks when I was at uni. Mostly rabbits at first, actually, and that's where the name came from, because my name is Cat. And so I was drawing them, and then I thought, oh, this would be cool if I made them. And I think I really, going through university, I didn't have any money. No one does, and and I really wanted to give my friends special presents, so I started making them little toys based on these characters that I was making. And they were really basic. They were kind of just very two-dimensional, flat felt pieces that I'd stuffed with little cotton wools that I'd found in the medicine cabinet. Just really basic things, but my friends really loved them, or they said they did. And it was just so nice to kind of make something and gift it to someone, even if you didn't have much money, to like make something meaningful for someone else, or something like an item of comfort or something. And I kind of was very interested in seeing how people would receive them and like treasure them. I guess it's like something that you kind of forget when you grow up. It's like you had all these toys when you were little, and at some point you disown them. But when people as adults like receive them again, and it's like something to really treasure. I thought that's really lovely. And that's what spurred me on to make more, is like gifts and then, exhibitions and things. So it kind of just grew very slowly out of that kind of desire to make things for other people, like a token of comfort, I suppose. Yeah. So I can't really pinpoint an exact starting point.
And then once you started to create your first babies, I guess, your first like gifts or, you know, tokens, like looking back at that, like how much has your work changed, and like how long would it take you to be happy with your final product when you were first starting out?
They didn't take very long. They were just, I drew a rough shape of a rabbit on a piece of paper, cut it out and drew it onto the felt, and then just blanket stitched around it, sewed a tiny little face on, stuffed it, and put a little cottontail on, and then I think I used to put a little love heart, embroider a little love heart, and they were very simple. I wish I could find one now, actually.
You gave them all away.
Kind of give an example. I gave them away. I'm sure I could call in some photos, but yeah, maybe I don't want to see them. But but now, like comparatively, like over the years, when I just started getting more interested in the different shapes you could make with felt, 3-dimensional shapes, and then I started adding wire, like armature wire, so they could pose, and and then later started animating them. And now I'm kind of really on that animation trip. I'm like, what can I do to give it this movement and that movement? So
I've
they've
been
really,
seeing it.
they, like I really interested in that direction. So I guess, and sort of like needle felting came into it as well, because I was pretty, just mystified by that process at first. And then when I found out what it was like, you just stab this wool with a needle. That's what you do for ages and ages. It was kind of amazing. So just kind of applying different techniques, and comes out of like a need to see how I can add this technique to this character. What can it do, kind of thing. So they've really, hopefully they'll change even more over the years. Like, yeah, I wouldn't want to. Sometimes I find myself making the same thing over and over. I'm like, got to move on. So,
right.
Yeah.
That's a sign. That's a sign to change things up. Well, something that surprised me was the fact that you don't use any like templates or anything like that. You just do it all just kind of by like hand, by memory, by, I guess, trial and error.
Yeah.
So how much of that affects like the final product, like the initial vision that you have in your mind before you start, and then as you are creating it, like how much does it morph into something different? Are you ever like kind of surprised by the character that comes out?
Yeah, always. Like, I think I like it because I like to draw, and then it's funny because I look at my drawings and I can see it in my head as a stuffed toy, but my drawings are very different to my toys. Like I've had friends that have drawn my toys. I'm like, oh, that's what they look like illustrated. They don't look at all like my drawings, which I find is interesting. But I'm never really disappointed because I don't have expectations, and like on purpose, because I find that then it's easier to embrace the what comes out. And that's what I like, is like the expressions and everything change so much. And sometimes like you can be making something and then you'll just put the eyes in and you'll be like, that looks amazing. It's so funny. Like it just
happy accidents.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, well, what if I put the eyes here or whatever? Like you can, if you make it in a sculptural kind of way, you have a few more options instead of like having these set expectations, like this has to be there or whatever. And, like a lot of the times the eyes are wonky, which is what I like. I mean, that's kind of what people are like. It's good. I enjoy watching like characters in the real world and saying like, oh, that guy has his pants pulled up really high. I'm going to use that for my next soft sculpture or whatever. Like I enjoy taking cues from people watching and stuff like that, seeing good outfits. And so, I can bring that, like I'll be working on something and then I'll go out and bring that home and be like, I'm going to give this guy a red tracksuit kind of thing. Just because that's what I saw someone wearing. Yeah, so it kind of gives you options. And sometimes I have like, 3 on the go on my desk and one will take ages to finish just because I don't know where it's going or, So it's kind of nice. It's like a sculptural thing. It kind of takes the pressure off what you want the end product to be.
Yeah, I think that's like such an important lesson. So many people could take so much from that idea of not having expectations so that you can be kind of delighted with the end result that isn't going to be anything like what you had in your, your rough sketch of your drawing or your outline of your book or whatever it may be. Like it's never going to end up being exactly like you had it in your head, to just be so open to those changes. And you also like, I've heard like you like when a stitch isn't exactly right, or there's like some kind of imperfection in it, like we were talking about, it kind of gives it character,
Yeah, I think I like it when you can see the hand of the person that's made it in there. So it's like, you can see that someone has made this and it's imperfect, but it's like beautiful in the imperfection. So like that wonky stitch or whatever, or that little like pucker or whatever, it just gives it that little bit extra character that I think is just very lovable.
Now you mentioned having a few going at the same time. Do you find that you have a lot of those moments then when you're out in the world kind of observing things and like waiting for that new idea to hit you? Do you find that like when you do get that idea, you know exactly what piece it's going towards, or if it's going to be towards a future thing?
Yeah, I try to file them away in my head. Usually it's like the piece that I'm making at the moment, like I'll be subconsciously on the lookout for like oh, what kind of shoes is this thing going to have or whatever. And sometimes it's like the result of like Google image search or whatever, like,
Yeah.
what kind of shoes do bakers wear or whatever. But like a lot of the times it's just, I'll go out and it's that thing where you have a break from being at your desk. You go out and then the thing is there. It's in the world. Like you're tuned in and you're looking for it and you bring it home. So it's like the benefit of having a little break as well, where you can see clearly what it is you need to add to that character. Having a little break time is good. I do have like lots and lots of lists in my phone of like when I see these things and I'm like, oh, okay, got to write that down. And my list is very confusing to me when I look at it like, a couple of days later, like, what did I mean? I don't know what I meant.
That's one of my favorite things about my lists. I'm like, who wrote this?
Yeah, who wrote this? What did I think this was a good idea?
Yeah.
But that's funny too, because it's like, I thought this was a good idea 2 days ago. It's a horrible idea.
Yeah.
It's the benefit of like sitting on it, I guess, for a little while.
Yeah. I've matured so much in these past 2 days.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a better person now.
You mentioned the idea of like it started out very basic and then you added new elements like wires and stuff like that, and kind of graduating to new things or new challenges or kind of like a new dimension to your art. How earlier before you actually start doing that or implementing that thing or trying to learn how to incorporate that thing, how much earlier did you get that idea? Like how long does it take you once you're like, all right, I need to get moving on to this new level? How long does it take you?
Yeah, it is tricky that because I guess when, because I do it as a full-time thing and, always, you can't always work to the timeline you want to work to because you have to make money and get jobs done and work to deadlines for other people as well. So it's hard to prioritize sometimes when you want to learn a new thing. I guess sometimes I almost like shoot myself in the foot almost to try and learn those new things. Like, for example, like my shop will be going really well, but I'll just be like, no, I have to close it for a while because I've got to do this thing, self-indulgent thing where I want to like, do this crazy new technique or whatever. But it can be hard to justify doing that for yourself. So it's always different. So, for example, like I really wanted to try making giant needle felted works for a long time.
Like how giant?
One of them is like 1 meter by 1.5 meters, I think.
Oh wow!
So like,
okay, so giant.
pretty big, yeah. And I had these ideas in my head for a while, and I just needed an excuse to make them, and I made some for a show last year, like just 2, but I was like itching to make more, and I just had to kind of ride through a few other projects, great projects. Like it wasn't like a hard task or anything, but I had these in my head to be like, got to make them. And it wasn't until this year that I decided to just like set aside 1 day a week to work on these sculptures, just because you have to kind of be quite immersed in it to kind of keep going, and you're just leaning over needle felting for hours and hours and hours. And so I thought, well, 1 day a week, that's doable. And it kind of worked out really well, and I made a new body of work for an exhibition, and yeah, it was great. So now I felt like I got that out of my system and kind of was trying to be quite strategic about how I fit it into my life. And there's other things where, I'll just be like, oh, I'm never going to get that done if I just don't stop everything else. Yeah, it's kind of different every time. Like sometimes I'll try and just be like, okay, set aside an hour for this, do that. Or sometimes I just got to clear my schedule and get it done in a week,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that's the way to go too. It's like still getting to your normal stuff, but finding ways to start the process of tackling this big project. Sometimes I do recommend to like just decide to, I'm going to work on this thing until it's done and just get it out of the way and just finish it off. Like, but also sometimes it is helpful to be able to, kind of have devoted time that you can kind of look forward to, like where it's like you're doing something different, you get to shake things up and you think in new ways and all at the same time start chipping away at this big goal that you have. Yeah,
it is hard because like some things require a different mindset, and, you know, difficult when you are essentially making your craft for your living. So prioritizing something that doesn't make you a living can feel silly, but eventually it won't be silly because it will feed into the rest of your work and make it stronger. But sometimes it's hard to see that perspective. And so, yeah, it can be really tricky. And, you know, you don't want to resent your other work. It kind of takes you on lots of cycles and you're like, oh, but in the end, it's better just to go ahead and do it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the number one curse of doing the thing that you love full time. It's like you start to slowly resent it if it is becoming your job. So it's like definitely finding ways to navigate those scary waters of not hating the thing that you used to love.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't got there yet, but there is time, like different projects, and everyone will identify with that. Is like some, like that you have a difficult client or just a difficult job and you're like, what am I doing? This isn't like I'm in too deep kind of thing. And why did I do this thing I do for joy and now I've taken it and ruined it?
Right.
But yeah, that only happens rarely. It does happen though.
Yeah. I wonder, do you have any like resistances or fears or anything like that you maybe used to deal with or maybe still do deal with on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think new fears come in all the time. I think mostly they're internal, like those resistances come from myself. So at the beginning, because of the way I slipped into it, not really consciously knowing that I was actually making myself some sort of career out of this little pet project that I had. It took me a while, like I just coasted from one project to the next for quite a few years and wasn't stopping at the end of anything to kind of reflect and be like, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing now. And I just found myself like 5 years later, okay, well, I had moved from Tasmania to Melbourne where I live now, and I'd gotten a grant from the Australian Council for the Arts to kind of start. It was like called an Art Start grant, and you got like some startup money for your arts business. And I was like, okay, I've got to take this seriously because I've got this grant now. And then once you start taking it seriously, you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? And so what did I think I was going to make a career out of making soft toys? Am I nuts? Like when you start to think about that, you're like, that's when the self-doubt comes in and it's like, does the world really need this? Why am I doing this? Like, is it just self-indulgence or whatever? And then, I mean, like coming to terms with those, I think it's just talking to people and like you're in a similar field or whatever makes it easier to kind of talk it out and whatever. But yeah, the self-doubt is definitely something that pops up every now and again, and just like having confidence in your work. I mean, confidence is so tricky sometimes, like you have too much or not enough, but you know, like I think like it's so important to have it just to keep yourself going, if you know what I mean. Like it's so valuable and something that just can slip away so quickly. So you've got to kind of be like, wait, come back.
Yeah. It's definitely like a sine wave. The having confidence and feeling like you're on the top of the world and everything's going great, and then even in like the same day sometimes being like, wait, what? Who did I what was I just just kind of like we were talking about with reading your notes, you know, from you know, a couple of days ago, and be like, who do I think I am?
Who am I? Yeah, what am I doing? And yeah, it can be so affected by external things as well. Like you'll get an email and be like, oh, that's it, career's over, done. And then like you'll just be like, no, just, you know, calm down, it's fine. You've got to remind yourself you've been doing it for quite a while now, and just you'll be fine. It'll be fine. And yeah, like I mean the nature of this work that I do is like I just have to diversify all the time, like take lots of different projects and work with lots of different people. So every experience is going to be different, but I feel like every experience strengthens you for the next one. So it gets better, but yeah, the self-doubt and the confidence thing is a constant battle, I think.
Yeah. One we all deal with for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's what is good, is like everyone has it, so it's like I'm not alone.
But it
I don't
definitely
know.
feels alone sometimes.
Yeah, that's the irony. Yeah.
Well, and something else that can help with that too is like, and something that you've done is built an audience. You know, you have a lot of supportive fans and people that are interested in your work and buying your work and purchasing it. And you can, you know, with the comments that you can see that it's bringing joy to them, and that must feel so good. What has your experience been like on Instagram and other platforms and communicating with people and also building an audience?
I guess Instagram is at once like scary and amazing.
Right.
And it was funny the way it happened, because when I first installed Instagram, I was like, oh, funny filter for my phone, haha. And then was putting whatever on there, and someone's like, oh, that's public, you know. I was like, oh, really? Okay. I mean, you know, they were just photos of my friends or whatever and my cat. And then I just thought I'll start uploading my work on here. And then it was probably a couple of years. I think I got featured on Instagram, you know, when people first join up and they're like, you might like this page. And I was featured on that, but I was unaware that I was featured. And I was at my parents' house in northwest Tasmania. The internet was really bad there, and I woke up and I thought it was a glitch. It said like I had 60K followers from like having 1,000 or something. And I was like, oh, you know, funny glitch. Haha, Instagram, what have you done? But they were, because they'd come to my work not having context for it, a lot of the comments were quite awful. And
oh,
so,
really?
yeah, quite like, what is this? This is stupid. This is ridiculous. Why are you showing me this Instagram kind of thing? I know I had a very early on experience with trolls and stuff, but also learnt to delete and block people quite quickly.
Figured that skill out real quick.
Yeah, no, but it was quite scary, because it was like, well, when I was telling one of my friends, she was like, it's like someone coming into your house and saying they don't like your house, or they don't like your life, you know, like it's a very personal thing. So I learned quite quickly to kind of distance myself from it, or just give it not too distant, but like remember that it's my business and it's not to everyone's taste. Like I don't want to be to everyone's taste. Like it's kind of a niche thing, and that's fine with me. I think I then got featured through Instagram through an interview, so people could see where I was coming from, because I think when people came to my account, I don't really put much personal stuff on there. So they were like, who is this person creating this stuff? So when the story, they gave the story of me behind my work, I think people had a context for what I was making, and then I got a lot more positive feedback from that. Yeah, that was a great experience. So it is like I've kind of had the good and the bad. But I mean, I really enjoy putting content on there that people seem to get joy out of, and that's kind of rewarding for me, because, yeah, I like to make people happy.
Yeah, and you do. So especially having that early experience to such a great degree, what kind of lessons could you instill on any of us that get trolled or get a negative comment or anything like that? Is it as simple as just, you know, having the confidence in your work and realizing that what you do isn't going to be for everyone, or is there some other trick?
Yeah, I think I had to just realize that, it's not going to appeal to everyone. And, you know, the ironic thing is, when I first started making stuff, after I was making all these little rabbits with love hearts, whatever, I started making like zombie rabbits and rabbits with like bleeding hearts and like really creepy, gothy emo stuff.
Nice.
And I was trying to creep people out. This was before the internet. And then now I'm just making, like, I look at it and like, oh, happy croissant, and someone's like, kill it with fire, and I just get a real kick. I just get a real kick out of that. It's like, well, you think that's creepy because I was trying to be creepy before and now I'm not, and people find that creepy. So I just think it's funny. I kind of really like getting funny reactions out of people. Like if someone's like, oh my God, this is hideous, or this frightens me beyond words, I'm like, well, that's a kind of reaction, isn't it? And I just have a little bit of a giggle because, yeah, I think it's good. I like having a range of reactions, but there are like people you can tell, and listening to a lot of podcasts on trolling and stuff, I mean, it's never really about you, is it? So you've just got to remember that person is probably suffering themselves, and it's really hard to ignore. But, like when you do have followers, people come into battle for you, and it's kind of just looking at this battle go down, and you're like, oh, guys, don't fight over me. It's fine. I'm okay. Don't worry. But also very nice of you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's also very sweet.
Yeah, it's very sweet. So, like, I try to, like, have a good relationship with Instagram in terms of, like, we don't see each other too much, but I just use it as, like, a tool, I guess, to show people my work, and like when it gets a bit emotional or if it gets too much, I just kind of try and step away for a little bit, which I think is like everyone's still trying to navigate this thing, aren't they? Like I really like to hear other people's experiences as well, because some people have just had purely positive experiences, which is really great. But I'm kind of grateful for having the weird roller coaster that I have had. It's been good, and I get I think I've made a few friends out of it, and yeah, it's mostly nice.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking about that a lot recently on the podcast. Matthew Miller was talking about it last week, actually, about how we need to like develop these new virtues in this like online world, because we just aren't kind of equipped to handle it, and it's overtaking our brains and our attention. So it's really important to not let it take over our emotions. And when bad things happen on the internet or on Instagram, to realize that doesn't mean that your life is bad. It's just, somebody either being mean or dealing with their own problems and whatever. And it's trying to find ways to shut it off or to kind of distance yourself from it. It's tough, but
while still being engaged. I know it's kind of like tricky. And I find, I just really like listening to podcasts about it and stuff, because I mean it's so funny. It's like this tool was given to us but no one was told how to use it, and so we're just seeing it's playing out everywhere, everyone using it in their own ways, or like this is how you use it or whatever. But obviously everyone's going to have a different way of using it and a different way it can be effective for them. So like I kind of had a bit of a I was just querying myself earlier in the year, because I was like, well, I don't really show myself or talk about my emotions or anything. A lot of people like to say like, hey, I'm the person behind this, and I don't tend to do that, but I don't feel the need to do that. So should I do it still? Like just because that's what everyone seems to do. And I was like, no, it just doesn't feel like me. So I'd rather just keep it like this. So, I don't know, it might turn out that later down the track I decide to do that, but it is funny, isn't it? It's like seeing everyone kind of working out how to use it. Mm-hmm. We're going to look back on this in like 20 years' time and be like, oh my gosh, what we did.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like disco. We'll be like, what happened?
I wore that. The blur.
Well, no, I think you're right. And, if you don't want to say something like, and you see everybody else saying something, like if that's not your like comfort zone, like you don't have to do that. Like just come on Your Creative Push and talk about it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, I'm happy to do that. It's kind of like, I don't know. I was talking to my friend about it the other day, and we were saying how we kind of almost feel lucky that we are from a generation that didn't have it when we were in high school. So it's not like a part of our lives, whereas like maybe kids who have it now, it's just like indoctrinated in them, ingrained. Yeah. And so I kind of feel lucky that I can keep it at a little bit of an arm's length, without feeling like, if we were saying like if we want to show someone a photo, we just text them a photo to that direct person instead of like posting it on our thing. And it's just and maybe I feel lucky that I had that. But I mean, it might mean that, younger kids are finding more effective ways to use it for them as well. So yeah, but as far as I'm concerned, I like the way I'm able to step away from it sometimes.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's so necessary sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see this this new generation that has only had anything that they've ever wanted to know at their fingertips, and the ability to communicate with anybody they want to at their fingertips, to see what happens. It's gonna be scary, but it's gonna be interesting.
Very interesting. I look forward to it.
I look forward to it as well. Well, before we let you go, I wanted to ask you about Soft Stories. Could you tell the audience about that?
Soft Stories is my collaboration with my good friend Isobel Knowles. Actually, Isobel has been pretty influential in my whole career, so I should have talked about her before now. But
no worries.
when I moved to Melbourne, I met her, and Isabel's an animator, but she also does a billion things. She's like really good at everything. And we made an animation together called I'll Know How. She came into my studio, I think, when I first moved here, and she'd left her keys at home, and she lived with my studio mate, and so she was waiting there for keys, and she saw these owls on my desk. She's like, "What are you making?" And then I had all these owls like lined out in all their parts with all these feathers and stuff. And she said, "We should make an animation together." And we did. And the animation was just like cobbled together with kind of recycled bits and pieces, lots of cardboard, felt. We didn't know where to locate this land, and we just had a bag of stuffing. So we're like, oh, it'll be in a cloud. We just kind of made it very ad hoc kind of animation, stop motion animation. And I didn't know much about animation at all, apart from, just the basic what I'd seen on the telly, and just watching this come to life. And then she showed me the edit, and I saw my characters blinking, and I just kind of lost it. It was amazing.
They're alive.
They're alive.
My babies are alive.
Exactly. It's like some sort of happy Frankenstein moment. And
nice.
Then we showed this animation at an exhibition I was having on a big screen, and the publisher just happened to come along. And this is like the story that infuriates many people who want to get into children's books, where it's like we were just lucky. The publisher was there. She saw the animation and said, "I want to turn this into a children's book." So we made I'll Know How, the children's book, and then we decided to call ourselves Soft Stories because we were finding we were making more artwork together. We made another book. We would do kind of children's workshops. We make lots of things to do with factories and how things work, and mechanical, kind of soft mechanical things, which is hard to explain. But we actually just found out we got a grant to make a new animated work next year, so we're very excited to be working on that.
Cool.
And I'm excited to be learning more about animation because it's kind of where like all of my joy is coming from. Just it's something I really enjoy, and I don't see myself as ever being an amazing animator, but I just really like that process, and Isobel is an amazing animator, so together we will make something fun.
Together you will conquer the world.
Maybe softly. Softly conquer the world.
Well, that was the first time you met when she left her keys there?
Oh yeah, she'd locked herself out of her house. It was like she was waiting in our studio for our studio mate to come back and give her the keys. And so it was, very fortuitous how we met. She was just there and I was there, and that's kind of what happens in my life. It's just things like this happen, and then I follow that path and poof, things happen. Yeah.
Well, and then it was her. So your idea was just to create an animation just for fun?
Yeah, just for fun. And I mean, that's another take-home tip is that most of what I've done is just for fun, and that ends up being work, but not in a bad way. It ends up being, I think that's what people can engage with. Like maybe they can sense the fun, and that's what people seem to respond to. So it's always the projects that we do for fun that seem to get a really happy response from people, which is nice.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I'm sure everybody listening probably has one or two or multiple instances of, you meet somebody and you realize that you have this like kind of creative overlap perhaps, and hey,
Yeah.
we should do something sometimes, and then inevitably you don't do it.
Yeah,
So just
exactly.
like if you get that kind of, you meet that person or things seem to gel, or you get this great idea to do something just for fun, to like just do it, like set a date in your calendar to like meet that person or talk to that person, and just get together on a Saturday or something, and start doing it just for fun, because it's so
Exactly. I
important.
mean, yeah, like when you were small, you used to do that all the time. You'd go
Right.
around to your friends for a play date and you'd make some wild, wacky thing. And why don't we let ourselves do that now? Like, it's kind of like people feel like it's too silly or whatever, but it's not too silly. Just set up a play date with your friend and see what happens. Like, you'll probably make something really cool.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Yeah. Kat, it is time for the final push.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Yes. Okay, well, I always find advice difficult because I guess everyone is very different and is in a different situation, but I would, just based on what I've learned, I would say whatever your creativity may be, you should respect it. So you should nurture it, be friends with it, kind of treat it like a friend, so feed it cake or take it for a walk or
Yeah.
just treat it really nicely, because, I found this has like helped me a lot, is like if you separate it from yourself and like treat it as if you would treat a friend and not treat it like, we beat ourselves up a lot. Everyone does. And I think your creativity gets beaten up because of that. And so if you separate your creativity and be like, treat it as you would a friend, give it time when it needs time, and it'll take you places. So yeah, that's what I've learned. So if that helps anyone, I hope it helps.
I definitely will. Treat it like a friend. I think it's so important to,
Yeah.
not only treat yourself kindly, but to treat your creative impulses and those ideas that come to you, like to treat them kindly and like let them in,
Yeah, exactly. Let them in. Have a play date.
Have a play date. I love it.
Yep.
Kat, thank you so much for coming on the show today, for being a friend to us. I appreciate that, and for letting us in. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to have a chat.
Yes, it has. Thank you. And you can find Kat on her website, catrabbit.com.au, or on Instagram. She is cat_rabbit, CAT_rabbit, like the animals. And we'll have everywhere that you can find Kat at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/Kat. Kat, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Yay! My thanks again to Kat for coming on the show. I felt so happy after talking with her, and there's 3 things that I wanted to get to real quickly from this episode that I just wanted to touch on. Number 1, finding a way to repurpose your work to make it work for you. If you are selling your original stuff, instead of putting it up and selling it, and then that's the end of the story, that's the last time you see that piece of work, think about ways that you can repurpose your work, ways that you can get more value out of your valuable time that you put into making this thing. It might take a little bit of brainstorming, and it might take some journaling with yourself or whatever, but find ways to give those pieces a bigger punch. Secondly, set a play date with collaborative partners. Like we were talking about in the episode, it is a rare thing to find a like-minded person that you might mesh with. It might be scary to ask them out, so to speak, or ask them to come over and, work on something. Or when you do get those bursts of ideas, when you really mesh with somebody, and you're like, okay, let's do something. Like literally set a date. Make a date and make it an important part of your agenda, of your calendar. Pen it in in permanent ink, and make that thing happen as soon as possible before that excitement starts to wane and you forget about each other, and then suddenly it's 5 years later and you see that person again and you realize that you just wasted all of that time and creative potential that you could have been working together towards something that is a big question mark, that neither of you have any idea where it could go, but you never know how far it could go until you actually do try it, until you actually do communicate and set those play dates and stick to them. And then thirdly and finally, treat your creativity like a friend. This is kind of something we talk about a lot, but it definitely bears repeating. Treat yourself kindly and treat your creativity kindly. When you get creative ideas, hug them, embrace them. Like Kat said, give them cake. Whatever you need to do to nurture that friendship with your creativity, this thing that comes from somewhere else, nurture it, embrace it, treat it like a friend, and be happy that it's a part of your life, because like Kat said, if you do treat it kindly, it will take you places. On our next episode, we have Sophie Gamond. Sophie is a French award-winning photographer and animal advocate living and working in New York, and she comes on the show for a mind-blowing episode where she lets us into her creative story, and it's a great creative story, but also what she is currently up to, photographing animals, specifically dogs, specifically pit bulls. And it all comes together in her latest project, a book called Pit Bull Flower Power, a collection of photographs of these beautiful pit bulls wearing flower crowns made by her. So she talks about all of the different elements that went into that, into making the Kickstarter, into making flower crowns, into the stories behind these dogs, and how it all came together. I had a great time talking with her. It's a can't miss episode. If you want to find out more about Sophie, you can head to her website, sophiegamond.com. That's SophieGamand.com. On Instagram, she is Sophie Gamond, and we'll have all of that linked up, as well as everything we talked about today with Kat at yourcreativepush.com/306. But that's all I've got for you today, so hopefully you were very inspired to go and get your creative work done. So go and get it done. We will be here for you next week if you need that push again. I love you all so much, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.